You are listening to the Give and Go podcast. For the next 20 minutes or so, Brandon Wendt and Drew Montaigne will rank their top 5 centers in the NBA, as well as break down the impact on the return of Andre Iguodala to the Warriors lineup. Give and Go is every Wednesday from 6 to 8 on KRNU2, live online at krnu.unl.edu. However, the show will not air until January 15th due to winter break. Thanks for listening.
Like a torn ACL to an athlete. Booby Miles Friday light capture me in my hometown.
This is Drew Montaigne alongside Brandon Wendt after that groovy commercial break. We're going to get into a conversation here about the top 5 centers in the NBA. This is sure to be at least an interesting discussion. We have not had any conversation about who our top 5 is on either side, so let's get to it. Hopefully we have some interesting conversation here.
You want to go back and forth on this, or should we? I say we go back and forth rather
agree.
than
Let's
just
do
list
that.
off our top 5.
Let's do it.
So I'll start off with mine. And this is one that I definitely like as a young player in the NBA who will continue to improve, and for one of my favorite young teams, and that is Nikola Vucevic, also goes by Nick Vucevic, of the Orlando Magic. This is a guy that I really like his game. He's got a whole lot of things that he can do on the court. His main skill is his rebounding. The guy is an absolute beast on the glass. But he can do a whole lot of other things. He's got an always improving post game. He's continuously getting better and better at that. He also has the ability to stretch it out to the mid-range. He's very good at knocking down those 18-footers. And another thing that I like is that this season in particular, he's really improved on his free throw shooting. That was a big issue for him last year, and that's something that he has improved on greatly.
Yeah, I have Nick Vucevic as my number 5 best center in the league as well. He's a guy who I believe he came from Philly. They traded him away in that Andrew Bynum trade, one of the multiple guys who kind of got away from Philly there.
That was really a terrible trade for Philly if you look at it in many aspects. They also got Mo Harkless from Philly in that deal.
Yeah, and this Nick Vucevic, like Brandon said, or like you said, as he is one of these guys who is going to be a force in the league for many years to come. I believe he's only 21, maybe 22, and he is always improving his game. That's one thing we love to see from guys, is when you go into the offseason and say, hey, I need to work on this. You come back the next season, you improved after a long, hard, working summer. We saw Steven Jackson have an interview with a radio show and he blatantly came out and said, I do not work out in the offseason. It was kind of something that I don't know if it's common knowledge that he doesn't do that, or if it's just one of those stunning facts to us that a guy who plays at professional athletic level doesn't work out at all during the summer. He only raps. Hey, maybe we should take that up.
Definitely.
We could go rapping in the offseason. We'd make a good combo.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but whatever. I mean, I'll give it a try. I'm always down to try new things.
That being said, Vucevic comes in the offseason, works tremendously hard, improved his free throws like Brandon said, and he's added a few moves to his post game. When he came in, he was kind of raw. He only had 2, 3, you could maybe stretch it out to 4 post moves. Now he really utilizes all the moves depending on the situation. Love the pick. We had the same. Number 4 for me is Brook Lopez, center for the Brooklyn Nets. This is a guy who has tremendous talent and tremendous potential. He's got a really high ceiling. He's got the 3rd best PER in the league right now, something that a lot of people may not realize, as he has kind of been under the radar, if you will. One of those guys who really is a shot alterer. He doesn't block a lot of shots, but just him standing there in his 7'1", somewhere in that range frame, and sticking his arms straight up like I'm doing right now, he really alters shots. He's not a shot blocker, but he's one of those guys, kind of like Andrew Bogut. Doesn't block a lot of shots, but when he jumps, it's hard to shoot the ball over him.
I like that pick in the 4 spot. I actually have him coming up in my top 5. But for my 4 spot, I've got one of my favorites, a guy that it's a love-hate relationship because he's got so much ability, the potential to be the best center in the league, but he just hasn't really put it all together, and that is Boogie Cousins, DeMarcus Cousins, of course, is his real name, of the Sacramento Kings. He can do it all. I mean, the thing that really amazes me the most about him is his ball handling. I've seen times where he's gotten the nickname Magic Cousins after Magic Johnson because he'll get a rebound and he'll push the ball up the floor like he's a point guard. And the thing is it looks good when he does it. He doesn't turn the ball over or anything like that in those situations. But aside from that, he's a 6'11", 260, 70-pound beast who can really overpower anybody down low. He's got a good ability to draw contact and get to the free throw line. He can stretch it out and shoot the mid-range jumper. He's really the total package when you're looking for a center. It's really just him putting it all together, getting his emotions in check, and really becoming the elite center that we know he can be.
Definitely. I have him at my number 6. I went a little bit further with this just to kind of clarify, making sure I wasn't missing anybody. One of the reasons, like you said, his emotional game gets a little bit too involved in the actual game itself. Obviously, you have to have a little bit of emotion. You have to show it. You have to feel it. But he lets it go a little bit too far, one of the problems I have with his game. That being said, I love the pick there. He is a fantastic center. I think he will end up being, at some point in time, probably within the next 4 or 5 years, the best center in the league at some point, if they can really get in and hone that talent and get him to calm down a little bit when certain things don't go his way. And one of the best plays in the game is watching Boogie go baseline to baseline.
Definitely. And we'll move on to the number 3 spot in my list. And this is the guy who I had winning the Rising Star Award, and that's Andre Drummond, a guy who, only being, I believe, 19 or 20 years old in his second year in the league, has already catapulted himself into this top center conversation. He's a guy that really fits the prototype for an NBA center. He's big, he's athletic, he rebounds like crazy, shoots at an unbelievable field goal percentage, mostly because he's just dunking it the entire time. But that's really all you need out of a center. I know that Boogie has the potential to be the number 1 center because of all the different things he can do, but there's nothing wrong with a guy like Andre Drummond who does a couple things but does them extremely well, and that's why I have him in my number 3, and he can move up even higher just because of the potential that he has.
I could see him potentially being a Ben Wallace type player someday. I really think that potential is there for him. I think if he can improve some of his defensive skills and work on his footwork a little more. I think that's one of the few areas that he really struggles in as far as those areas where he exceeds many people's expectations is. At number 3, I have Al Horford. This is a guy who, coming into the league, you see him playing the 5. We said it earlier. He would play a little bit better at the 4. We'll see how that works out with this roster. But he's just a dude who can stretch the floor. He's a great rebounder. He can block shots, and he doesn't miss time. He doesn't get injured a lot. He's one of those guys who is kind of like your safety blanket, if you will, for the Hawks. My motto for the Hawks, and one that I'm not sure if you've adapted to, is never trust the Hawks. NTTH. You can't trust them. Just when you think they're going to get good, they're bound to fail. It's a little something I picked up from Zach Harbour on the EOB podcast. That being said, fantastic player. He's got still more potential, I think, than he's even reached yet. And I'd look for him to maybe even improve his number on this list as well.
Definitely. I'm a big fan of Al Horford. He just missed the cut for me. He's one of those guys that I love his game. He's such a skilled offensive center. He can do so many different things. I'd like to see him improve a little bit on defense. He's a good defensive big man, don't get me wrong, but he reminds me a little bit in a sense of a guy like Al Jefferson, who I've said before on the show is my favorite player in the NBA because I've got a soft spot for a classic back to the basket center. But Al Horford, to me, is similar to him in a way that they're not the greatest defenders. They can give you a lot on the offensive end, but as a center, you're looking for an elite rebounder and defender. They both are good rebounders, but they're not considered elite rebounders. They'll get you 9 or 10 every now and then, but they're not going to be getting upwards of 15 like a guy like Drummond. So that's one reason why I don't have him on my list, but I do love his game. My 2 spot is who you had, I believe, in the 4 spot, and that's Brook Lopez. This is a guy that he does it all. He's another one that kind of fits that Al Jefferson Horford mold, so it's kind of hypocritical of me to have him in my number 2 spot But I think one thing that sets him apart, you mentioned it, is his defensive abilities. He's one of the best players when it comes to opponent field goal percentage at the rim, according to player tracking on NBA.com. Adding to his game, not only the defensive part, is his amazing offensive ability. He's up there in player efficiency rating. This guy has got some of the craftiest moves in the low post. One thing that I'd really like to see him improve on is his rebounding. He hasn't done that all that well in his NBA career, especially for a guy that's 7 feet tall. So that's something that I would hope for him to improve on, but he is definitely one of the best centers in the league.
Yeah, and that's why I had him at number 4. I think that key factor there is that he isn't able to rebound the ball as well as you might think a 7-footer would. That being said, I think he'll go into this offseason, maybe even overlay into the next, and really improve in that area. I think that's one of the ways that he will vault himself potentially up to the number 1. My number 2 is Dwight Howard. I'm assuming this is the guy you don't have on your list. You're shaking your head, yeah. I love his play. I love his energy. I think when a Sheik ends up getting traded, you'll see his numbers jump even more. You saw his numbers jump from 12 points and about 13 rebounds a game in November, already to 19 and 15 points and rebounds respectively in December so far. Getting Omer Sheik out of there, getting this chemistry a little bit more built and defined with that team, I think will also vault his game. He's another one of those guys where, depending on how the season goes, he could be back in that number 1 spot by the end of the season like he was for so many years.
For me, Dwight Howard, you were right when I said that I don't have him on my list. He's just one of those players that it's more of a personal bias against him as to why I don't have him on my list. I just think he's a bit of an enigma to a team. I also don't like the fact that his game hasn't improved as his career has gone on. His post game is just ugly to watch. He's only got 1 or 2 moves, and they're not even very effective. He's simply a rebound energy type guy. And to me, I have that in Andre Drummond in my list as a guy that's going to bring that. And I think that he's going to be even better at it just because of the fact that he's younger and more athletic. Dwight Howard's not the same player that he was before. He's really overrated when it comes to his size. I believe he's listed at 6'11", but the guys on the Grantland podcast, Bill Simmons and Jalen Rose, have both vouched that they think he's closer to 6'9". Jalen says that when he stands up next to Dwight Howard, they're about the same height. Dwight might be a little bit taller, and Jalen's 6'8". So that's something that I really think that without the size of a guy like Drummond or my number 1, which we'll get to in Roy Hibbert, and without that athleticism, he doesn't really bring all that much to me. I mean, I know he's a great rebounder, and
I think he's an athletic freak.
He is a freak, but he's not the same that he used to be, is what I'm saying. He's really, with the injuries that he's encountered throughout his career, he's had back problems. He had the shoulder problems last year. He's just not quite the same athletically. That came off wrong when I said without the athleticism, because he is athletic, but compared to a guy like Andre Drummond, who's 6'10", 6'11", and literally jumps out of the gym, I just don't see him matching up well athletically with him, and they're the same type of player.
Yeah, and I like your analysis of it. I just think that energy and that rebounding ability and his ability to come down the court and still put a post move on. I think that's something Drummond really lacks, is any form of a post move. You've seen him do it a few times, but he's not a guy that you can at least give the ball to down in the low post. That being said, let's move on to our number 1s. I would assume we both agree here. We both had him on our all-NBA first team as Roy Hibbert as the best center in the league. He's got a defensive efficiency rating of 82 right now. For folks that don't know, that would be a NBA record all time for best defensive season in defensive efficiency ever by any player. Something that I find somewhat astonishing. His last 2 games have been somewhat of a drop-off. Last time he played, that is not tonight, versus the Heat. I forget who they played last. I believe it was Detroit in a game which they lost. Roy Hibbert went for 6 points and 4 rebounds. Something you don't see a lot from him. And he wasn't in any particular foul trouble until later on in the third quarter. So we'll see where he goes, but I still think he's a solid pick for the number 1.
I agree. I've got Roy Hibbert as my number 1 center as well, mainly because he's a dominant defensive center. You just mentioned that he is on pace to have the greatest season in the history of the NBA, defensive efficiency-wise. And adding to that, he's also a solid offensive center. That's really underrated about him is his offensive game. He, like you mentioned about Howard and Drummond, they're not great post players. You can't feed the ball to those guys and expect them to go to work and get points. Well, that's something that Roy Hibbert can do. I mean, he's not an elite post scorer. He doesn't match up with a guy like Horford or Brook Lopez or even Al Jefferson when it comes to post scoring. But he can get the job done down there, and with his size being 7'2", he can get it over just about anybody. He has a nice little hook shot and a running hook shot. I really like his game, and I think that he definitely earns the spot as the number one center in the NBA.
The most important thing I think for him offensively is that unlike a lot of these guys, he really has – it's kind of what you look for in a wide receiver. He has soft hands. When you do feed it to him, he usually comes away with it, barring a bad pass, a very good defensive play where someone comes in and bats it out of his hands. He's pretty solid when it comes to catching that inbound pass, something that you see a lot of these big guys struggle with for a while. Because in college, if they went to college, in the case of some of these guys, you have people who have been given the ball when they were wide open sitting out, and they just back down a much smaller, possibly 6'9", 6'10" center who they're playing on the other team. As where when you come to the NBA, you're facing these 7-footers or these 6'10", 6'11", elite athleticism guys. So that's one area that I think Roy Hibbert's kind of shadowed himself. We're going to go to break real quick. We're going to come back with a little bit of a personal conversation, if you will, about Golden State and Oklahoma City. Maybe get into this a little bit more like we did last week. This has been Drew and Brandon. We'll be back for just a few minutes on KRNU2.
For a little...
And I heard him say, nothing's ever promised tomorrow today. And I heard him say, nothing's ever promised tomorrow today. But we'll find a way.
Welcome back to Give and Go on KRNU2. I'm Brandon Wen along with Drew Montaigne. We've just got a few minutes left. I'll get to the scores real quick before we get into our brief conversation. Late in the fourth quarter in Miami, the Heat have cut the lead to 6. It's 88-82 Indiana. A game in Orlando has just gone final. The Jazz beat the Magic 86-82. Also just going the end of regulation in Toronto. We've got a tie 95-95, Charlotte and Toronto. That game's going to overtime. Early in the fourth quarter, Atlanta, the Hawks lead the Kings 98-93. Early in the fourth quarter in Boston, the Pistons have a 6-point lead, 91-85 over the Celtics. Also early in the fourth quarter, the Washington Wizards are out to a 12-point lead, 91-83 over the Nets. Early in the third quarter in Milwaukee, the Bucks have a 48-45 lead over the Knicks. Early in the third quarter in Minnesota, the Timberwolves still dominating the number one seeded Portland Trailblazers 72-49. Dallas has got a 41-29 lead midway through the second quarter over the Grizzlies. That game is in Dallas. Late in the first quarter, the Phoenix Suns, this year's surprise team, are out to a lead 27-19 over the Spurs. And still coming up are Houston and Chicago, as well as New Orleans and Los Angeles. We're going to get into a quick discussion for the last 3 minutes of the show or so about the matchup that we talked about last week between Oklahoma City and the Golden State Warriors. Drew, I know you have a few things to say about the return of Andre Iguodala.
Yeah, on the return of Andre Iguodala for me is a very interesting topic. It's something that I've heard mixed opinions about across bloggers, analysts, and in my opinion, and I think Brandon will agree with me, we've talked about this a little bit, that he solves all of the problems that Golden State encounters in a year. Their defensive struggles, guarding the best wing defender of an opposing team, and really that guy who just does the little bit of things. There's an awesome article on Grantland about how he's kind of the modern-day Scottie Pippen. He's the guy who he didn't sit in the shadows, obviously, but he is a guy who really helps everybody on the team be better. He doesn't just, he's not sitting in the shadows, but when he is in the game, he makes tremendous difference all around.
I definitely agree that he fixes their problems, and the problems that they had were pretty big problems. As we noticed as he was injured, they really dropped off compared to the way they started. I think the biggest thing that he does for them adds a ball handler to the team. Other than Steph Curry, they really don't have anybody that can handle the ball outside of Andre Iguodala. Klay Thompson does not create on his own. He's strictly a spot-up shooter, hangs out in the corner and knocks down jump shots. I mean, you can feed it inside of the big guys all you want, but you still need somebody to handle the ball, especially with a guy like Steph Curry, who is very effective off the ball. He loves to come off screens and catch and shoot, and that's something that Iguodala helps add to this team and makes not only the whole team better, but makes Stephen Curry better. When the team is missing Iguodala, all the attention is on Steph Curry, and it makes it really tough for him to succeed. As good as he is, he's not a take over the game type of guy, in the fact that he's not really athletic. He can take over the game by shooting, but he has to get open. He has to get shots, and without a guy like Iguodala, he can't get his shots. So it's really hard for him to take over a game. Unlike a Durant, LeBron, Westbrook, those type of guys are able to take over no matter what because they're just bigger, faster, stronger than everybody else.
Yeah, and the main thing with Steph not being as athletic is that he really, really strives one-on-one matchups. If he's double-teamed, it really doesn't work, like you said. He just isn't able to do it.
And it really helps out with the fact that Iguodala's a ball handler because it just adds so many more things to their offense. It's not like it only helps Steph. It helps Klay Thompson through it helping Steph because as great of a complementary player as Klay Thompson is to Stephen Curry, the fact that he can't control the ball really hurts him. With that being said, we've run out of time here in Give and Go on KRNU2. It's 8:30. We really like to thank you for listening to the show this week, and we would hope that you will be back. January 15th after winter break is the next time that we will be having the show. It'll be at 6 o'clock, January 15th. Tune in on KRNU2. For Drew Montaigne, I'm Brandon Wendt. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful holiday season.